I don't know that I have a bio of George, but I know George, not probably quite as well as Velda does. But I tell you what, I will say what I know about George, and that is, A, he's about the nicest guy I ever met. But I say that about a lot of people. I'm not one of those people that dislikes other people in general. George has put together this amazing effort over the last year or so with the C2 matrix, and that's the thing that really sticks out. And brought together. So some of the people that may be newer to the industry are not probably as aware that in the age of advanced pen testing, in the age of EDR and very, very solid defenses, there's been this enormous explosion in tooling and open source projects that is out there. And we needed somebody like George to kind of bring that together, or maybe I should say George stepped forward at the right time to bring that together into the C2 matrix and into some sort of digestible form. And these are only the public open source versions for the most part, and some commercial offerings. I know there's probably 1,000 other efforts that are sort of hiding in the shadows that people are using in the age of EDR and the work that we do. So we're very thankful for George in the industry. We appreciate our relationship. And Scythe, of course, is a sponsor with us here at Wild West Hackin Fest. And I don't know, that's about as much of a bio intro as I've got. Velda, do you want to add anything to that, or should we let George take it away?
Yeah,
go forward.
That was wonderful. That was wonderful.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, George, well, we're going to hand it over to you, sir. I'm going to go off camera. Are you ready with your slides?
I am ready. As soon as you give me that access.
Let's see, did we make you presenter? Let me do that for you real quick. And make presenter. Make George the presenter. Yes, that's what I intended to do.
Show my screen, monitor 1. Bam. You see my screen?
All right, very good. Over to you, sir. Take it away.
Thank you. And hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. How do I get rid of seeing my face? There we go. All right. I can see you on Discord, so if you want to randomly ask questions as we go, I appreciate that. It's how we interact, and I know that you're actually there, and I am not just speaking to a camera, because I know you're all there. And thank you all for being here. This is definitely a bucket list item for me. Love Wild West Hack Fest, Black Hills, and all the people there. I've known them for many, many years, and we all share that. Giving back to the community is extremely important, and that's why we're here, and here we go. So I'm Jorge Orchilles. Today we're talking about adversary emulations, and if you've seen my talks before, I've added a lot of new things to this one. I'm actually going to take you on a little voyage of how we went through this whole ethical hacking world that we're in, and what do they all mean, and what, etc. Right? So thanks for the intro. Chief Technology Officer at Scythe. I started there about 3 months ago. Has been amazing working with folks like Adam and Bryson and Christine and Liz and everyone there. So that's awesome. The co-author of the Purple Team Exercise Framework that I'll mention here, as well as the C2 Matrix. Spent 10 years in a global financial and running the offensive team. So that's really what we're going to talk about, that trajectory and why things developed from the user perspective, and why I think adversary emulation is really important. I also teach for SANS. I'm a certified instructor, 560, 504. Actually, 504 is the next one I'm doing at Rocky Mountain. And I am the author of the 2-day Red Team Exercises and Adversary Emulation course. I've done other things like working group and voting member for the Common Vulnerability Scoring System, version 3 and 3.1, which is the current one. Also wrote some other frameworks, and we'll cover that here. But enough about me. What are we going to talk about? Well, is this another of your adversary emulation talks? Kind of. This has really been, and I've generally developed talks for some time, right? And you improve them as they go. And of course, there's going to be a lot of new things here that you might not know, because you're Wild West Hack Fest, and this is definitely up there with Black Hats and the DEF CONs. So we'll go through that. We'll do story time. Hopefully I keep you all engaged and entertained, and we'll go through a few things. And thank you. Every time I steal some meme or something, I will thank that person, and you should probably follow them. So this one was taken from someone at Splunk, and I thought it went very well with this slide. So what are we going to talk about? We're really going to focus on adversary emulation and how we got there. So this is just based on my experience for the past 10 to 11 years at a large financial that, yes, is financed and cared about security for way longer than some other organizations, right? So not everyone's there. Some newer organizations might be starting somewhere else. No one step is more important than the other. So I'll actually highlight some of these as we go. You don't have to go step by step here, right? A lot of people see like red team in the middle and they're like, oh, there's no way that's true. This is more important or that's more important. They're all equally important. This is just the trajectory we took. And of course, you can take your own. But let me share my experiences so that you at least won't make those same mistakes, right? So Dave Kennedy gave the keynote on day one, right? And I stole one of his quotes. And that's a good thing about going on day 3 is that you see some other presentations and I remove stuff that's just repeat, right? Because you've seen it. And he said, vulnerability management is the hardest part of any InfoSec program. And I want to reiterate how important that is. So even though vulnerability scanning is like that first thing you should probably do, it is probably one of the most important ones. So after that, the pen testing, the red teaming, the purple teaming, that also brings value. But you have to do some basics, right? And the biggest basic one is inventory, right? Especially at scale, when you work at very large organizations with a bunch of data centers, bunch of internet-facing IPs, a bunch of internal IPs, right? There's some stats there. It was around 1.2 million internal IPs that we were scanning. And it only takes you missing one, maybe one IP not being in your inventory, one app not being in your inventory, right? You all know what happened at Equifax, perfect example of patching everything they thought they had, but missed that one app, and it ended up costing them and us dearly. So take hybrid approaches to this, yearly firewall review, right? Look at what ports are allowed inbound, and then scan against those ports, identify what hosts are alive with those custom discovery scripts, looking at those ports, and then scan those ports based on the fact that that's the only thing available. And then, because you have so many IPs, try to diff it, right? If you found a new port 80 popped up, maybe that new port 80 deserves an entire vulnerability scan. But if you scanned a web app last week, are you going to scan it again this week? Maybe if you only have one web app, right? But if you have thousands and thousands of web apps, that might not be the case. And then prioritizing vulnerability patching is extremely hard, right? When we're talking about the scale of 300, 400, 500,000 Windows systems, right? You can't just patch in a day. You wish we could, right? We all wish we could. Like, it's not a political thing like we want to, but you're going to have to prioritize that. And how do you prioritize that? Well, you have common vulnerability scoring system, right? Shameless plug. And everyone gives it crap. And I get it. It's a scoring system, not a risk rating system. And 2, the vendor only calculates the base score. It is your responsibility to do the vulnerability assessment part, where you calculate your own environmental and temporal score and decide that. There's other things in the industry. For example, the exploit predictability scoring system is a new special interest group that just started as part of FIRST as well. So if you're interested in this stuff, let me know. I could definitely get you added there and really move this forward, right? But the point is, you want to patch at least as fast as the vendor is releasing patches, and sometimes faster. Then pen testing came about, right? And the main differentiator from doing vulnerability scanning and vulnerability assessment is that you're actually exploiting the vulnerability, right? And you all know an exploit is a code or technique that takes advantage of a vulnerability. You also know that exploitation can be risky, right? You can crash a system or a service, and the focus is generally on initial access, right? Finding the way in. Now, building a pen test program at a financial, in particular, one of these global financials that move trillions of dollars per day, right? You buy a Coke at the gas station, that is going to touch some financial system. Imagine if you brought that down, right? So you need a lot of process, you need methodology, and you need people, behind everything that you do to really build this and show the value. There's also other types of vulnerability of pen testing, right? Things like bug bounties, where you find vulnerabilities, you exploit them, and you're reporting O days, right? Or product testing, where before purchasing a solution, you test that product and you report O days. It's a lot of fun, so definitely very, very important. But we had this thing, or we have this thing called PCI DSS, and I don't want to blame just them, because a lot of other regulators did this. They started limiting the scope of pen tests. How many of you have been requested pen tests on just 5 IP addresses or just one web app, right? You can post on here on track 1. I'm watching. I'm sure many of you have had those requests of only test this one system. And once you got SQL injection, don't move laterally. Just, yeah, that's enough. Thanks, right? So that became a problem. And to really illustrate this problem, and I know all of you have seen MITRE ATT&CK. This is my mandatory slide on MITRE ATT&CK, but I want to do something. This is Attack Navigator. We'll talk about it later. There are 184 techniques, not including sub-techniques, in this view. I did a Control F and searched for exploit. There are 6 techniques that mention exploitation out of the 184 techniques. There's also this part on the left called initial access, and a lot of pen tests focus on this. It's an important part. I am not saying this is not important. It is a very important part to test initial access and to prevent, right? But 9 initial access techniques are a very small scope of a framework that covers what adversaries are doing. So enter the red team. We focused on testing a lot of technology when we looked at this and what adversaries were doing, 5-6 years ago when we built the red team inside of a financial. I believe we were one of the first. We then created a SIG on that and helped other organizations create them as well. We wanted to test more. We wanted to test people and process, because that is what the adversaries were going after, right? I think the reports back then were saying 91% of the breaches that were occurring were through phishing, right? So why aren't we testing our people? And that's where the red team came around. And then shout out to Red Team Journal. Even though they're not blogging anymore, definitely follow them on Twitter and check out their website. They have a lot of cool stuff there. And I took that definition since they've been around since 1997, right? And the red team is the practice of looking at a problem or situation from the perspective of an adversary. Yes, this is what pen test was supposed to be. But again, in the financial space, pen test got very watered down. And that's why we started using this military term to focus on testing assumptions, testing people, process, and technology. And lastly, the customer was different. In our pen test, the customer were our vendors. And now our customers are the blue team, the ones that are defending. We also had the difference of internal and external teams. Now, some of you might not have an internal red team, and that's fine. Others, larger orgs, might. In ours, we got up to a 12-person internal red team. And this is the story, right? We started doing repeated engagements, a lot of remediation testing, lots of retesting. And I mean lots of retesting, right? The same thing. And we had insider knowledge. We knew what worked, right? We knew exactly what worked. And when we did these no knowledge tests against the blue teams, we'd get in very quickly because we knew exactly what we had to do. And of course, there's internal politics. The bigger the organization, the more politics there are. Then you always still have your external. Just because you have an internal red team doesn't mean you don't have an external one. You always want this outsider view, this snapshot engagement. They have experience in other areas, right? Shout out to the Black Hills, the Trusted Sets, Grim, right? Red Siege. All of them bring awesome experience doing amazing work. You still want that view maybe once a year while your internal red team focuses on other areas. So how did we start? Back in 2015, there was Dridex. If you don't recall this was like an invoices due with a Word file and a malicious macro. And at that point, we used Core Impact because we did pen testing, right? I think the options back then were Core Impact and Metasploit and Canvas and things like that. And we said, let's go after 1,000 InfoSec people in this group and send them this phishing email with a weaponized macro file. And then if we get a shell back, then we'll run Who Am I just to see who fell for it and exit out of the shell. Someone came running to my office like 10 minutes after we started, pale, and I'm like, oh my gosh, we took down Exchange. 200,000 people aren't sending emails anymore, right? Like, no, we have too many shells. Like, what? You mean we have too many shells? I've never heard someone complain about having too many shells in my life. They're like, no, it's Core Impact is just not handling it. That's like 250 reverse shells coming in at once, and Core Impact was not made for that, right? And we had like 25% rate. So that's when we realized we had to break this up. Focus on a phishing program for awareness, and then do what by then we were calling end-to-end emulation. And this is thanks to the cyber kill chain, right? So might be a little early to drink, but there's a buzzword that we'll obviously hit, and we'll cover this shortly. But then we started doing these end-to-end red team emulations. It was awesome. Empire had just come out. We were owning things left and right. It was awesome. We were winning. We were kicking Blue's ass. And then in 2017, we were getting more sophisticated. Now we can actually emulate and do like the Lazarus hack. Like, remember Bangladesh Bank, a huge Swift based hack? Let's do that. Oh, and we did that, and we were so cool. And then in 2018, we were doing it again. And then eventually someone's like, whoa, you do realize you are doing the same thing over and over because we're not fixing the problems fast enough. And you're also an internal team, so you keep doing the same thing. How about we bring in an external regulator or an external tester to see if this is really possible? And then you see the numbers go down and down. And we made a mistake. Right? I am coming here to tell you that we made a mistake and you should not make this mistake. So the cyber kill chain, Lockheed Martin, you all heard about it, came out in 2011. We don't like it because it doesn't go in depth, and there's nothing between command and control and action on objectives. Like, what do you do once you're inside the network, right? But it allowed senior management to know what the heck is going on. Like, how do these attackers get in? And that's why they started calling these original, what we were doing were adversary emulations at that point, but these red team engagements, end-to-end tests. And then Paul Poles, shout out to Paul, definitely cheers to you, came out with the unified cyber kill chain. It's a different depiction of it, but it's exactly there, right? Initial foothold has a whole bunch of tactics, then network propagation, then action on objective. But then if you're in the financial space, you have some regulations, right? If you operate in England, you have the Bank of England that's your regulator. They came out with CBEST, right? And if you're in the European Union, which involves a whole bunch of countries, right? You have Tiber EU or Tiber for that country. See Olaf there. Tiber NL, right? You've done those. And this is another regulatory requirement. And then the Monetary Authority of Singapore is like, oh, we have this requirement too. And then Hong Kong. And then all of these things were like, you'd read them and they were great. They were threat intelligence based. They were red teaming. They were full scope. They were like what a pen test should be, right? But we couldn't call it a pen test because the pen tests are those watered down regulations that they had already, right? So they also did things like closure, like actually closing the exercise, response, and analysis. But if you're a global bank, you can't do one of these every year, right? Like one per regulator. So what did we do? We said, all right, the global banks, at least through what is called the Global Financial Markets Association, we said, all right, there's all these frameworks out there that want to do yearly regulation. How about we write one that covers everything, and then we do this a global red team engagement with observers from the various regulating groups, and we only do this one time, one big good external red team engagement, right? And this is where we are today. we published this in 2018. You can go out there. None of this is things that I can't talk about. All this is public. You can actually go and get that. I was one of the authors of this framework, and it has a super long name, right? A framework for the regulatory use of pen testing in the financial services industry. But as the XKCD there shows, that now we have one more framework, right? So some are working around this to do it once per year, but that's where we are. So if one external red team end-to-end occurs per year, then what does the red team do? Well, what we started doing was just running Empire over and over and over, working with the engineering team, working with the operations team, just so that they could catch Empire, right? And this was a problem, right? I'm not talking about today because Windows 7 is end of life, right? No one has Windows 7 anymore. So what did you have to do to catch Empire 4 years ago, right? In 2016, you had to, one, upgrade to PowerShell version 5 because that's where you have logging. Then you had to remove PowerShell version 2 because you can just downgrade, right? Then you had to enable all these things, and you had to do all this first in a dev environment on a single endpoint, right? Then once you figured out, how to upgrade it, you had to upgrade all your production systems, right? All 100,000s of them, or 200, 300, 400,000. Then you had to send those, get the logging working, right? Enable logging, enable constrained language mode, AMZ, DSC array, all this stuff, right? And send that to a log aggregator. So now, good, you're making progress. You have PowerShell version 5 only. You've removed PowerShell version 2. You have these logs. You're sending it to a log aggregator. Now we need to enable analytics and alerts. And then your SIM just can't handle all of that, because it turns out that there's a bunch of solutions out there that have what looks to be hacked PowerShell code, right? And by hacked PowerShell code, I mean the same PowerShell code we use in Empire to launch an agent, or you use in Cobalt Strike to launch an agent. Like, the same thing is used by actual solutions. So then you have to create this analytics, and then, where do you send all this? And from the red team perspective, what did we have to do? We just had to repeat the same thing over and over and over. And I am one to suggest that having some of your best resources, which are the red team, right? The people, the part that you can never automate, right? Having them do the same thing over and over is probably not the best use of those resources. And then that's when we came to the realization, and I'm quoting Ryan O'Horo here, that said, I believe it was at the Purple Team Summit last year, that the only wrong way to do red team is to ignore the needs of your blue team. So that is where we said, you're right. If we keep doing these external blind engagements and getting in and winning, and then we have to spend all this time retesting and retesting and retesting, what if we work together? And really, I have to give credit to our senior manager, my boss's boss, that actually brought us all together, folks from the SOC, from the hunt team, and from the offensive team to Black Hat a number of years ago. And that's where we got to know each other and get a little more friendly with each other. So at the end, and today, what is a Purple team? Well, it's a virtual functional team. I actually know one or two different large financials that actually have people dedicated to this. We'll see that more and more. But right now, you don't need that. It's just a team that works together to measure and improve the defensive security posture, right? The people, process, and technology, right? And even though Purple, because we have absolutely no creativity in our industry, we said red and blue together is Purple. Do not leave out cyber threat intelligence, right? Cyber threat intelligence is extremely important in doing both Purple team exercises and in doing adversary emulations, because they're the ones that are going to provide you the threat actors that are likely to attack you, the ones that have the capability, the intent, and the opportunity to attack you, the ones that are attacking the bank next door, the smaller bank, right? And if you know that, then you can emulate that. And when they come and attack you, you are prepared and you can fight back. And you can fight back to a point where you get some of these arrested. So that will be a story for another day. But pretty much CTI provides this threat actor and the adversary behaviors. The red team creates the adversary emulation plan. You tabletop it, right? Or as if you saw Olaf's talk, right? You create hypothesis around what these different behaviors are and how you might be able to defend against them. Then you actually emulate those behaviors. The blue team will then look for indicators of that behavior or realize that something might not be working. Again, this could be a people problem that they didn't know to look for this. Could be a process problem where they saw an alert, they escalated it, and it didn't go where it needed to go. Or it could be a technology problem where you actually need to tune the security controls, right? And we've done a lot of talking about things like, sorry, I was looking down here at you all's awesome memes, and I do notice that there's a little bit of lag there. And we've talked about EDRs, right? And what they do. Like, you can't put an EDR in production and just hit go and be like, yeah, we're good, right? Normally, the red team will get caught in a lab environment with EDR completely turned on. But once you try to turn that on in a production environment, the more machines you have, the more work you have to put. And that's a people thing. So that's purple team exercises. So if we're going to talk about purple, we have to talk about blue, right? And shout out to all the defenders out there, right? That's you. Blue team is not an actual role, right? There's security operations center, the hunt team, the incident response team, the digital forensics team, the managed detection and response folks, right? Shout out to all of you, the MSSPs. I will even argue that blue team is all of us. Like, red team is part of the blue team, because when the malicious actors do get in, you're all going to work together to fight that. And the goal is simple: identify, contain, and eradicate attacks. Very simple words right there that mean a lot, right? You have to do things like log, alert, and respond, right? Also taken from other folks' presentations here, right? So one, log the event locally, the relevant events locally, right? You don't need to log everything, and then send those logs somewhere. Then if something bad is indeed there, then you need to do an alert, and then eventually respond to it. And I think I need to speed up. So can you do a single TTP? Who am I? All right. One command prompt. That's actually two TTPs. You're running T1033, which is the actual who am I, user discovery, but you're running that on a command line. Same with ipconfig. Same with PowerShell, right? PowerShell, who am I? So which of these would actually get caught and why? Right? Is it only the last one? Is it the second to last one? How about if someone were to do just who am I and ipconfig in a minute-long period, or PowerShell in a minute-long period, right? Or do a set of these TTPs together, right? Because you can have the detection, but you might only want the alert and the response when a number of these trigger. And that is why I propose not doing a single TTP, but chaining them together. And that's where adversary emulation comes in. It's a type of red team engagement, right? There's multiple types. Here, we are doing the same TTPs of that particular adversary against ourselves to understand if the organization is prepared for a real attack and to improve. So we do this for the community. I'm not going to talk anything of any paid for product, right? So everything I'm going to do today is going to be completely free, along with our blog posts, right? We have Threat Thursdays. We introduce an adversary. We consume CTI. We create an adversary emulation plan. We share that plan with you. We emulate it, and we talk about how to defend it. So I know Red Team Fit is a thing now, so we're going with Garmin. Everyone heard of Garmin? Everyone that used Garmin saw that it went down, and it was a ransomware attack. It lasted 7 days. They asked for $10 million. So if you look at ransomware, how does it work? Traditionally, it was just getting access to a system and encrypting files. Well, if you start looking deeper, you see how that works and how it's evolved. No longer is it just owning one machine. They're actually going through like the whole kill chain, if you will, to do their work. They're not just being opportunistic. I mean, some are, but the more sophisticated ones are. Then how do they encrypt files? 3 methods. Read the file, create an encrypted version of the file, and replace the original. Use raw disk access for encryption, or open the file and encrypt its contents. Some organizations are stealing that, and they steal it and then extort you. Others ransom it and ask for payment. Some don't steal it and just ransom, and then they get paid, right? So MITRE ATT&CK came out with Impact. I believe April 2019. Don't ask me how I remember these things. And Impact is a new tactic that is the ability to manipulate data. So if you look at one here, like data destruction, someone deleting a file, is that something that you would alert? Perhaps. Maybe you log it, right? But how often do people actually delete files, right? So here it's something where doing one particular technique might not really trigger something. So let's look at Evil Corp. Evil Corp is the group that hacked Garmin. They actually use 3 different tools, if you wish. They use sockgalish, which was to deliver the JavaScript on compromised websites. So we can't really emulate that, right? You can't compromise a legitimate website. So you might have to skip over this, simulate this activity. And then they would drop JavaScript. That JavaScript would then execute some code, which would then run PowerShell. And then with PowerShell, they would drop Cobalt Strike. They would then use some living off the land tools to steal credentials, escalate privileges, move across the network, and then finally deploy the Wasted Locker malware on a whole bunch of machines. So shout out to Bryce for this meme. Posted it today on Twitter, and I mean, it's literally the ransomware operator starter pack. Then the actual Wasted Locker, what did they drop? They dropped and had this .wasted extension, right? So they would encrypt the files, give it this wasted extension at the end, download this ransom note, and that's what it looked like. So can we just take this and go with it? We can. So there was actually no MITRE ATT&CK mapping for this one, and we like MITRE ATT&CK because it gives us a proposal of what we want to do. So in this case, we extracted these TTPs and I mapped it to MITRE ATT&CK. So I'll show you that. And then once you have a plan, you have a bunch of other things to do, right? All of this was just threat intel. Then plan. Are you going to do an assumed breach, or are you going to do an attack chain? Here I'm proposing the only net new from Wasted Locker is the Wasted Locker malware, right? From that Evil Corp account. Everything else you should have already tested. So why are you going to do a full end-to-end again if the only new thing is this particular malware, this particular ransom that did certain things? Let's just focus on that. And then, of course, you have your rules of engagement. Don't encrypt real business data. Don't ransom real business data. Don't steal actual money, right? And then attack infrastructure. So for determining tools, C2 Matrix is a great place to go look. It is a community-driven project, and thanks, Joff, for the shout out earlier on. This actually started just as conversations in the SANS Pentest instructor Slack, Bryce and Bohr with Adam, and it has evolved, right? And now it's a ton of things. It's a little more than just a spreadsheet, although there is a spreadsheet, right, with a whole list of them. And if you read through this particular threat intel, you can see what tool they use, and you might want to use that same tool. Or if you've already tested against that tool, then you can test something else, right? Focus on the behaviors. There's also a virtual machine that comes with 8 of these already installed. There's a how-to site, etc. Then attack infrastructure. One slide to cover attack infrastructure does not do it justice, but we've had other talks about that. And here, what I want to focus on is a shout out and talk about Red Elk. Red Elk is amazing. It's created by the folks at Outflank, by Mark and the team there. Hi, Mark. They have a new version coming out. It's going to be amazing. This is the current version. You can get this right now on GitHub. You have your C2 servers on the top right? Use the C2 matrix to pick which one you want. Whatever C2 you want, there's 55 of them on there. Then you also need redirectors. And what Red Elk presents here is an elk stack where you get all your red team logs, because as a red teamer, you need to know everything you're doing, especially when you're scaling up, which was another big problem. When we had 2 or 3 red teamers, it was easy, just everyone used whatever C2 you preferred, right? Some people preferred the Red Team Toolkit, others preferred Empire, others preferred, Covenant, whatever it was. But you want to standardize this, right? So how do you standardize that? You can actually use whatever C2 they want, as long as it can be ingested by Red Elk. Then you have your redirectors. Some people like Apache redirectors, other people like Nginx, other people like, there's all these types. What you want to do is standardize all of this. That way you can scale up. And now on the bottom right, you have the white cell. The white cell is very, very important for a zero knowledge engagement, because you don't want a breach to occur in a country and someone there pick up the phone and call the regulator or call the FBI because there's a real breach and no one knew about it. The bigger the organization, the more chance there is for that. So you need those trusted agents to know what's going on. I don't even know how much time I have. If someone could let me know, but I will continue. So emulating ransomware, is that even possible? Of course it is. The secret is to not encrypt or destroy real production data. Instead, create new files. So over here, 4 steps that emulate this, right? And I put it in as simple terms as possible. Create a new directory, create a bunch of files, in this case, 5 meg files, 50 of them. Then encrypt those and delete the original ones and download the ransom note. So the most important thing is to show value. You have to show value. Right now, I'm going to show you Vector. Vector is awesome. Right after this talk is PlexTrack. That is also a very awesome tool to show the value. Track each engagement and show improvements over time. So enough speaking. Let's go through this. And Joff, for someone, till what time do I have? Till 40 past? Do I only have 5 minutes? So this is Wasted Locker. Look at this threat intel. This is great, super important information, but it's all human readable, right? Same as this. Great write-up, right? Shout out to NCC Group, shout out to Symantec. Oh, pretty colors, great. Beautiful to see, beautiful on your eyes. But how do you take this and make an actual plan? And then, of course, a whole bunch of IOCs that a red team cannot use. Oh my gosh, that's a lot of scrolling. So what did I do? I mapped this back to MITRE attack. And what I did is I mapped the entire actual kill chain that this particular threat actor did, how they went from initial access with a drive-by compromise to JavaScript, then PowerShell, then creating services. They used WMI for moving laterally, right? A lot of things that you probably tested. But the new things over on the right, under impact, data destruction, encryption, manipulated data, and killing the service. So if what's net new that you haven't tested before, you don't have to do this entire thing. You may. Red team and an end-to-end is super important. It depends on the business value. But if you've already done the first ones, isn't it much quicker for you to just do an attack chain of maybe 8 of these TTPs instead of the entire thing? I'm talking efficiency and value, right? Then the C2 matrix, can't do a talk without talking about it. I saw you all talking about VLOOKUPs. I saw Malice yesterday saying how much she hates that. Shout out to you. You're awesome. Nice unicorn painting. So here you can find things like Cobalt Strike and find information about how these work, right? There's a whole bunch of other things like documentation. There's a virtual machine. If you have never used a C2, download one of these, download the VM, and it comes already installed. And then choose, Empire, and it'll walk you through how to use Empire. Go to Covenant, play with Covenant, right? Coatic, whatever it is, use these, play with these, really lowering the curve on that. And then, as I mentioned, we share all of this every Threat Thursday in Community Threats. Here is Evil Corp. There is a Attack Navigator JSON. There's also the actual threat. So what does this look like? Well, if we import this into Vector, this is what it looks like. A very simple chain, right? You don't have to do the full chain. I'll show you what full chain looks like, but this is a nice little plan. You're going to do HTTPS for C2. You're going to drop the Wasted Locker malware. You're going to download a ransomware note. You're going to create new files, and you're going to encrypt and erase them, right? Simple. 5 things to test for that you can go one by one and see what works, right? Oh, Iceman, do you remember when was the last time I fell for phishing? Yes, I do. That sounds like some insider with a name. So Vector is amazing. Let me show you very quick something that we do. So let's pick, I don't know, Butt Trap. We were doing an engagement, and we do consulting for Purple Team engagements, right? So we create these. The first one is the planning phase. This is Butt Trap. It does C2 over DNS, HTTP, and RDP, and it does these things. We have a nice little chain here. Nothing. We don't have any action. Then the baseline run. The first run, we go through and, oh, look, DNS was blocked. That's awesome. But nothing else was detected or blocked. So we work as a Purple team, right? We do everything I mentioned. We triage and then take a look. And yes, this is real company data. We see how we have improved over the initial one. Then you could come over here to reporting, check out metrics. We can take a look at historical trending, for instance, and see how on the start of this engagement, we had almost no, well, yeah, we had zero detection actually. Then our detection got better. Then we did another adversary. And by the end, we actually have a nice looking assessment, right? Where we can show value. We can say, look, in the last 6 weeks, we were here with zero detection. Now, because we implemented syslog, we sent those logs, we worked with the SIM, we created these alerts, look where we are now. And that is the most important part. And I have no idea how much time I have, but here's a quick demo of only dropping the wasted locker. I've already created this for you. It's a wasted locker DLL. I'm going to mistyped it. I'm going to drop this just as run DLL. 32 wasted locker, platform, client, main. And really what I want to focus on is what's going to happen, right? This is 3 steps or 4 steps are going to occur. And I'm going to show you that right now. How much time do I have? Is my time over? Other considerations. It's okay to deviate from your plan, right? It is.
You got time, George. You got time. You got 10 minutes.
10?
Yes, sir. 10 minutes.
Beautiful. Okay, so take a breath there. Felt like that was a lot of information. Pause for a second. Okay, other things to consider. Do not stop doing any of the previous ones. They're all important. Just because you're doing an adversary emulation and you're testing a smaller chain doesn't mean that you're not going to red team anymore. Doesn't mean you're not going to pen test anymore. Doesn't mean you're not doing vulnerability assessment, right? Then when you do adversary emulations, a lot of people ask, do I have to stick to the plan? And the answer is absolutely not. The plan is a starting point. This is what this attacker has been seen to do. But do you think that attacker will establish a C2 channel and then realize that they got blocked somewhere and just be like, oh, I lost, I'm going away? No, they're going to come back. So just like that, you can do the same. You can deviate, just document everything that you do, right? Normal red team things. Another thing, TTPs on MITRE ATT&CK are dated. Now, we do mention those because a lot of people haven't tested them, right? So when we go out and we help people, level up, we start with MITRE ATT&CK because it's there, it's already documented. But to be on MITRE ATT&CK, you must see that in the wild first. Some of these are years old, so you can modify this. Also, some security tools are really good at catching very specific things, right? Hopefully, some of you saw Jeff McJunkin's talk, right? Talking about security controls. Look for these exact things. So deviate, get around that. You can come up with your own TTPs. You can do all of that. But if you do get it caught, if the red team gets caught, then document that as well. Document the wins, not just the wins for you, but the wins for the team, for the blue team as well. And give credit where credit's due. Now, Adam Mash gave a talk yesterday, and there was a little part there that's amazing. And I'm just going to throw it out there with not much context, but for avoiding heartbeat detection, 30 minutes per beat with some sort of jitter, obviously, seems to be the magic number today, right? That comes with some stuff, and red teamers aren't patient. You don't want to wait 30 minutes between that, right? And that's why I say automate it, right? Automate those TTPs. You already did all the hard work to gain access. Now automate all that stuff, right? So everything I did today was with a bunch of free tools, right? You may, if you're going to do this for an enterprise, consider enterprise tools, right? So consider things that might work, right? And this is where I give the shout out to the sponsors, ACM, right? Active Countermeasures, Black Hills, Plextrack, that's going to be on after here, have an awesome, awesome product for showing value, right? Obviously, Scythe is a great one for automating adversary emulation. I might be a little biased, right? But consider those as well. And then the future. This is where I think we need to go, right? Where we get cyber threat intelligence, and again, we're focusing on adversary behaviors when I say cyber threat intelligence, right? We need cyber threat intelligence that has those adversary behaviors in machine readable format, right? These reports are awesome, but we can't scale. Humans don't scale that well, especially when it comes to reading a threat intel report and then mapping it back to a plan, right? We want these created. So MITRE is doing some great work, right? They have TRAM, which they released a beta of it at AttackCon. AttackCon is also coming up again. They're doing this Power Hour thing. And then larger standardized adversary emulation libraries, right? Things like Atomic Red Teams, things like our community threats that we give everything out in JSON. Or MITRE. MITRE decided to do their adversary emulation plan, I think just a week ago, or their library just a week ago, where they released Fin6 in YAML, right? We need a standardized language for this so that we can all ingest this and test it, right? And here's an example of our methods, right? Some of these you can just copy and paste and run your own. You see MITRE attack mapping there. But it's more machine readable. And if we can consume cyber threat intel at the behavior level and provide it to the community in a standardized way, we can all test each other more efficiently. So some shameless plugs. Yesterday, we ran a Purple Team workshop. We used VMware Learning Platform for free for 2 hours. You sign in, you get a Windows server, you get a domain controller, a SAN Slingshot C2 Matrix Edition, a Scythe server, and a Ubuntu server, and you have 2 hours to do purple teaming. So you can create the attacks. Some attacks are already created for you. You can also do the blue team part where you enable Sysmon. There's a couple Sysmon configs there, the Swift on security one, and Olaf's Sysmon modular. There's Wireshark. We're going to add Splunk and other things to it, all for free. We're doing it for conferences. So we did Hack the Harbor yesterday. We're going to do one October 19th, then one for Grey Hat, and then one on November 12th, which is the day before a Purple Team Summit. So SANS did a Purple Team Summit last year. This year, they're not doing it. So I asked, is it okay that we run our own? And they were okay with it. I don't know how happy they are, but it's pretty much us doing it for us, right? So talk to some folks out on the industry, right? Shout outs to everyone that has helped out and really pushing the whole Purple Team thing forward. So we're gonna have multiple tracks. We just opened the CFP. So if you wanna drop some awesome red team stuff, do it. If you wanna drop some blue team stuff, do it. If you want some test cases of how you worked and collaborated with other teams inside your organization to share, do that as well. Before the talk, I mentioned Roundup. Roundup will be a half-day adversary emulation only little conference. It's free as well. And really the only thing that you have to pay for here that is really the shameless plug is my 2-day red team class that is going to be in Singapore and at Hackfest. As usual, I provide a whole bunch of references because I did not do all this on my own. So shout out to everyone. I try to give references as much as possible. And thank you everyone in the community that continues to give back. You know, people like MITRE, Vector, Outflank, those of you on here. And then just to wrap up, this has completed running. We can open over here, see that we've created a bunch of files. They were then encrypted. The original files were deleted. And then the actual ransom note was downloaded from Pastebin. So we just ran a very micro exercise, right? A little attack chain that covered these various different things I mentioned earlier, right? The HTTPS channel, dropping the malware as run DLL, right? Was there any detection for that? Downloading from paste bin, do you need detection for that? Creating new files and encryption. Maybe you have some sort of detection for each of these individually, but all of these running within, I don't know, this probably ran in a minute of each other. Probably something bad is going on, right? And that's really where I think we can use our time, right? I'm not saying don't do red teams, definitely do red teams, do full end-to-end, do phishing, right? Do the whole thing, but there's other ways as well during less times. You can do these smaller engagements, you can do assume breach engagements, you can, do a lot of purple teaming as well. So I think that covers everything right on time. Felt like I just talked and said a lot very, very quickly.
George, you're right on time, sir. Yeah, we're right here, 10 minutes
Awesome.
before the top of the hour. Thanks for the great talk. It's always important to be able to automate ourselves, right? I always like that message that we were talking about it earlier today. We have a shortage of talented resources in the industry, and anything we can do to automate and scale ourselves is a net positive. It's not a negative. And there's an old saying that I used to laugh about way back when. I blame Mike Poor. I just dropped Mike Poor's name twice today already, but it was something along the lines of if you can be automated with a script, then you're probably not doing it right. So it is important to get that message out and scaling up.
Like once you do it once, right? Like you do all this research, you created this awesome new TTP that no one knows about. Figure out a way to get that automated, share it with others, right? Because that's why you're releasing it, and then move on to other things, right? Don't keep doing the same thing over and over,
That's right. Stop reinventing the wheel over and over. Exactly.